Everdred was the first player to reach the max level of 99 in any skill. RuneScape's creators thought this was impossible. So what skill did he choose? How did he beat everyone else to 99? And why did nobody believe it could be done? This is the untold story of Everdred. Our story begins all the way back in January of 2001, right at the launch of RuneScape. A player named Everdred would become the 98th person to ever sign up for the game. Things were a lot different back then. The map was only this big, banks didn't exist yet, and player versus player combat was on everywhere, unless you opted out of it entirely. Everdred had never seen a game like this before, and he quickly became engrossed in its world. Before discovering RuneScape, he had primarily played games on Nintendo systems. He loved titles like Super Mario Bros. 3 and Dragon Warrior, so much so that he started creating a custom ROM hack of Dragon Warrior that made the game more challenging and introduced new content. At this point, he was about to enter high school, so he had plenty of time for hobbies, but it wasn't long before his ROM hack would be put on pause and RuneScape would gain his full focus. Like most new players, at the start, Everdred was sort of just a jack of all trades. He would hop from skill to skill, training them all with no real goal in mind. But when the crafting skill underwent a rework in May of 2001, it caught his attention. At the time, crafting was a pretty basic but tedious skill. You could make pots and pie dishes out of clay, shear sheep for wool and spin it into balls of wool, or use gold bars, gems, and molds to create jewelry. By now, banks existed. However, they could only hold coins. So if you wanted to craft pretty much any piece of jewelry in the game, it was a long and time-consuming grind. You could buy a ring mold and mine the gold in Remington, then turn the gold ore into bars nearby in Falador. But gems were truly rare. There were no gem rocks, but you could get lucky and find a gem while mining. Otherwise, the only way to obtain them was by hoping that you'd get some while fighting monsters. Now, when they first launched, there was no real reason for jewelry to exist. It was purely cosmetic. But soon after the crafting rework, magic also underwent a big overhaul. Included in this overhaul was the ability to enchant amulets, which gave them stat boosts. Luckily, Everdred started training crafting before this update, and now, not only was jewelry in high demand, he had the levels to craft most of it. Everdred would soon become a go-to source for these items, as despite having a crafting level that I'd estimate was about level 50, he was one of the highest levels in the game. He would post to the RuneScape fan forum tip.it that players could find him at the Falador Furnace on certain days if they wanted to buy jewelry from him. But he wasn't just making jewelry for the general public. Everdred had become friends with another tip.it frequenter who you may have heard of named Blue Rose 13X. I actually have a full documentary devoted to the massive smithing monopoly she had in RuneScape Classic that I think you'd enjoy. Anyway, when Everdred reached the level needed to craft diamond rings, he would smith 2, the first 2 ever created. He would then gift them to Blue Rose 13X and her partner Demonic. Everdred would continue crafting for a while, but it wasn't long before he had unlocked everything the skill had to offer. So he decided to look for a new skill to put his focus into. The skill he would pick would cement his name in RuneScape's history forever. But first, did you know that every day, millions of people have their data collected and sold by data brokers, companies that build detailed profiles about you from public records, social media, and anything they can find? You might be surprised how easily anyone can look up your full name, home address, phone number, and even details about your family. That puts you at risk for things like doxing, targeted harassment, phishing scams, or identity theft. But today's sponsor, Delete Me, can help. They're a hands-free subscription service that will remove your personal information that's being sold online. I personally started using Delete Me about late last year, and they've already removed over 150 listings about me from data brokers' websites. You have the right to stay private, so get 20% off Delete Me consumer plans when you go to joindeleteme.com/Colonello and use promo code Colonello at checkout. That's joindeleteme.com/Colonello, code Colonello. Eventually, Everdred decided on training woodcutting. He had actually already trained the skill to about level 80 before starting his crafting grind, which was extremely impressive, especially at the time, but he wanted to go even further. Now, woodcutting, and this might sound pretty shocking, was a pretty terrible skill at the time. Let me explain why. It was so early in RuneScape's history that only basic trees existed. There were no magic, yew, or even oak trees. They wouldn't get added until March of 2002. This meant every time you chopped a tree, it would give you a single log and then be chopped down, forcing you to wait for it to respawn before you could chop it again. Unlike the higher level trees added later, you couldn't just AFK for minutes at a time while your character steadily filled its inventory with logs. This might not be so bad, except for the fact that you could slip and fail to chop the tree. The higher level you were, the less likely you were to slip, and eventually you'd stop slipping entirely, but the early levels were very annoying. Now, multiple axe types did exist back then. When Everdred started woodcutting, the best axe in the game was the adamantite axe. But here's the thing, higher level axes didn't actually help you. They were all cosmetic. An adamantite axe and bronze axe were exactly the same. Even worse, you couldn't just click on trees to chop them down. You had to go to your inventory, right-click your axe, press use, and then click the tree every single time. It would take 3 clicks to chop down a tree, assuming you didn't slip. And the cherry on top is that there was no way to tell how much XP you actually had in a skill. All you knew was your level, so you'd have absolutely no idea how close you were to hitting the next level while training, which especially in the later levels could be super demoralizing. This all sounds pretty terrible, but there was a silver lining. These days, chopping down a regular tree gives you just 25 XP, but back then, the amount you got scaled with your level. At level 1, you'd get about 26 XP per log, and at 99, you'd get about 198, so not bad. Everdred would do all of his woodcutting in this forest just west of Lumbridge Castle. With trees densely packed throughout the area, it was one of the most efficient spots in the game. Everdred would even nickname this spot Everdred Forest. But since nobody actually calls it that today, the nickname never quite caught on with the rest of the player base. Not like it matters much anymore, seeing as how RuneScape 3 has replaced this forest with a massive crater, or sometimes a beach, but you can still visit it in old school, which is nice. Anyway, Everdred would very quickly raise his woodcutting level. Increasing it became pretty much his sole focus. At his peak, players reported that he was chopping about 4,000 trees per day, meaning he was averaging anywhere from 500,000 to 750,000 XP every single day. By August, Everdred was in the early 90s for woodcutting, further than anyone had ever gone. Level 99 was now within sight, a level no player had ever reached in any skill before. For a while, nobody even knew what the maximum level was, or if there even was one. Nobody seems to know how players figured out that the cap is actually 99. There's a few different theories, but it wasn't hard to get in contact with the game's founders, the Gower brothers, so perhaps someone asked them directly. Regardless, it was widely accepted by now that 99 was the cap. But even if players knew 99 was the cap, nobody ever thought someone would hit it. Andrew Gower has famously said, "We never actually expected anyone to reach level 99 in any of the skills." Reaching level 99 requires a little over 13 million XP in that skill. For most skills, this means hundreds, sometimes thousands of hours of grinding it. It takes so long that by the time you reach level 92, you're actually only halfway to 99. Andrew designed the XP curve so that you would unlock most of a skill's content long before you hit 99, because he didn't think anyone would be committed enough to get even close to the cap. But it seems he was wrong. Everdred was on the verge of making history, but he would soon take a break to do something else historically significant. On August 13th, 2001, The Wilderness was released. player versus player combat would be turned off everywhere except for here. But fighting other players wasn't the only thing the wilderness had to offer. The further you went, the more treasure it had. Some monsters dropped the valuable new Rune Fullhelm, and the game's first Runite rocks could be found here. Most interesting of all, Jagex would not update the world map to display what the wilderness had. They wanted what was inside to be a mystery, but of course, that didn't stop players from trying to map it themselves. Everdred and another player named R2Keen2 would take it upon themselves to screenshot and map the entire wilderness. They did so pretty quickly, and just a week later would publish it on tip.it. This was the first ever known map of the wilderness, and was a valuable resource for players for quite a while. After this, Everdred would return to woodcutting, this time with a nice quality of life update. The same day the wilderness released, the ability to track how much XP you had in each skill was also added to the game. Everdred was in the home stretch now. He was extremely close to reaching level 99, but there was just one more hurdle to overcome. Despite it only being cosmetic, Everdred really wanted to hit level 99 using a rune axe. It had also been released on the same day as the wilderness, and could only be obtained by making it with level 86 smithing. Now, like a lot of other skills I've talked about in this video, smithing was tedious, time-consuming, and expensive. Almost nobody had even close to 86 smithing, except for one player you may remember from earlier named Blue Rose 13X. When the wilderness launched, she was just a few levels away from being able to make a rune axe. So the story goes that Everdred asked her to make him one when she could, and he would use that axe to get level 99. Then on August 28th, 2001, he did just that. He would reach level 99 in Everdred Forest surrounded by his friends, including Blue Rose 13X. But not everybody in the RuneScape community actually believed him. Everdred got 99 woodcutting just 236 days after RuneScape launched. At the time, there were no high scores. There was a feature named RuneWho that would show you who the top online players in certain skills were, but woodcutting was not one of the skills available. When the high scores did release a few months later, in November of 2001, it was clear that Everdred was telling the truth. Not only was he 99 woodcutting, nobody else came even close to his level. But the question now was, what's next? Unfortunately, this is where the story becomes a little unclear. There is almost no trace of what Everdred got up to after 2002. It is known that he participated in a player-run event called the 2002 RuneScape Olympics, but unfortunately, no screenshots of this event survived. We have no idea who won each competition, or even if the event happened at all. It's possible it was planned, scheduled, and just never happened. The only thing we know for sure is that in mid-2002, he would become a fur trader. Bears, which had been in RuneScape since the game launched, had always dropped fur, and when gray wolves were added in February of 2002, they would drop a new item called gray wolf fur. Now, just hearing these items' names and looking at them, you might imagine that they'd be used in the crafting skill. Examining both even tells you this would make warm clothing. Turns out, during the entire history of RuneScape Classic, they were never given a use. Technically, you could sell wolf fur to Barik and Varrock for 120 coins each, but you couldn't make anything with it. However, it sure seemed like Everdred and a lot of other players thought they would be useful one day. In his forum signature on the tip.it forums, Everdred said, "I barter in furs. I have over 800 fine pelts and continue to collect more. I'm willing to barter furs for items." In a later post, he would say about 300 of his wolf furs and 50 bear pelts were available for trade. Perhaps once his massive investment fell through and he realized he wasted months collecting them, he left the game forever. Although player rumors suggest he quit in 2004. Perhaps when the game transitioned over from RuneScape Classic to RuneScape 2. We'll probably never know Everdred's true fate, but he absolutely made history when he was here. Check out the video on the right to learn more about RuneScape's first year. There were massive clan wars for control of major cities, hitmen, and so much more.